discourse that they want to, but that is what it is. Those are the fruits and signs of a democracy.
But this is no ordinary discourse, Mr. President.
My best. If I hadn't done what I did, things would have been much worse. In fact, many people ask me, Mr. President, why did you call in the army? I mean, what choice did I have? I mean, it would have been very reckless of me in the face of the kind of harm people had gone through, the 19 lives that were already lost, in the face of a burning Chief Justice office, Parliament, and the rest of it. I mean, it would have been very reckless of me not to mobilize every arm of government and every arm of our security agencies to protect the country and to protect lives. We had information, and that is why we prepared in the manner in which we did. If we hadn't prepared in the manner in which we did, we would not be counting 19. We would be counting different numbers.
Okay.
And I am telling you that the level of mobilization by criminals was heavy. In fact, many of the peaceful protesters, many of the young people, very well-meaning young people, left the town by an organization that can tell the country without verifying that there was a massacre in Githurai. In fact, BBC, on that account, went to investigate in Githurai. And of course, you have read, BBC has said there was no massacre in Githurai.
Mr. President,
there was one person who was shot by the police. Let me answer.
Yep.
So, an organization that is as reckless as to say there was a massacre when there was none, now is telling us there are 24, the police are saying 19. We will find out where the numbers are.
Okay.
But that is the credibility of the organization that you are telling.
Mr. President.
Now, former Member of Parliament Alfred Keter was arrested and released by the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, which has confirmed the arrest of the former MP. DCI Director Mohammed Amin said Keter is under investigation and will be produced in court. Keter was on Sunday picked up by police in a dramatic scene outside Holy Trinity Catholic Church in Kileleshwa, Nairobi, causing uproar. The DCI said Keter was booked at Kamukunji Police Station and later released pending forensic analysis of exhibits. Now, during the roundtable interview with President William Ruto, he said Keter had not been abducted but arrested.
Ni kama amekosa walikuwa wanafuata, si ndio? Ni kama alikosa, si ndio? Walikuwa wanamfuata polepole. Alikuwa amekosa huyu.
Alafu madam
alikuwa amekosa.
Bado naweza nikomata.
Ni kama amekosa walikuwa wanafuata, si ndio? Ni kama alikosa, si ndio? Walikuwa wanamfuata polepole. Alikuwa amekosa huyu.
Alafu madam
alikuwa amekosa.
I have told you, I made a deliberate decision to make sure that the police operate independently. That's number one. Number two, I have told you, if the police summon Linus Kaikai And Linus Kaikai refuses to go to the police. Are the police not entitled to come and look for you? When police arrest somebody, there is a constitutional timeline which they are allowed by the law to hold that person.
24 hours.
That does not amount to an abduction.
24 hours.
In my opinion. A case in point is what has just been said here about what happened earlier today. And you guys clearly said in this conference that it was an abduction. I mean, it's just clear now that it is not an abduction.
They are not
this is an arrest. And the police have come forward to say, this is the situation, we have arrested this person, and it is just good for us to all of us follow the law. And I agree with you. The police must. This is an arrest. This is an arrest. And the police have come forward to say, this is the situation, we have arrested this person, and it is just good for us to all of us follow the law. And I agree with you. The police must act within the law. That person.
24 hours.
That does not amount to an abduction.
24 hours.
In my opinion. A case in point is what has just been said here about what happened earlier today. And you guys clearly said in this conference that it was an abduction. I mean.
Now, President William Ruto as well says that funds directed to the offices of the First Lady, Second Lady, and Third Lady will cease starting tomorrow. The president says this will be done to tame the lack of funds in the country. All right, let's take a look at the newspapers and what is making headlines. All right, so the newspapers this morning, we begin with the Daily Nation that speaks of Gachagua opens up on his tiff with Ruto. Gachagua opens up on his tiff with Ruto. The Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, has given the strongest indication yet that all is not well between him and his boss, President William Ruto. The DP, however, said they will iron out their issues, even as he blamed people who recently joined the government for fueling the falling out. And that is a story that is on page 6 of the Daily Nation this morning, where Gachagua says, all is not well between me and my boss. Now, he said issues between them will be addressed in the spirit of unity and democracy. And the Deputy President, yet again on the spot over the relationship he has with his boss, President William Ruto, and exactly what is causing this, or how did they get to this situation. Now, in a further indicator that the two top political guns in the country had frosty relationship, Gachagua said he will engage the youths, that is Generation Z, on the issues they have raised on governance in the country in a process outside the one set up by President Ruto. Now, he says, I have no doubt in my mind the president and I are good friends, and we cannot allow anyone to come in between us. We will sort out any emerging issues between us, and we're calling on leaders to tone down. Now, the DP also alluded to the fact that some people in Kenya Kwanza coalition did not respect him and the office that he holds. And that is the latest concerning these two men whose faces are on the pages this morning. Also, top of the page, principals plan to increase fees next term. Principals say they will be forced to increase school fees starting next term after the government reduced capitation per annum. This is a big blow to parents whose children are returning to school starting today from the 1-week half-term break. Principals will have to find alternatives to keep schools running after the government said it will not be able to disburse the 22,000 shillings capitation per learner per year, but instead will distribute 17,000 shillings. So there's a reduction of about 4,000 shillings, and that is likely to have a ripple effect. Principals may increase school fees beginning next term. Also, why state withdrew controversial bill with new land levy? The fear of triggering public anger by trying to amend the constitution through the back door forced the government to withdraw the contentious Land Laws Amendment Bill 2023 that was already under consideration in the National Assembly. And that is a story that is on page 3. The controversial bill by Ishungwa sought to introduce a levy on freehold land. Now, at the time of the withdrawal, the bill which sought to introduce an annual levy on freehold land and also dilute the constitutional powers of the National Land Commission by transferring its major functions to the Lands Cabinet Secretary was before the House Lands Committee. The bill, sponsored by Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah, sought to amend the 6 Lands Act, the Registration of Documents Act, the Land Control Act, the Land Registration Act, Community Land Act, and the Sectional Properties Act. By virtue of his position, Ichung'wah, who is the Kikuyu Member of Parliament, signs all government bills introduced in the National Assembly. And so that bill was withdrawn. And those are the headlines on the Daily Nation. Now let's switch to the Standard. Era of kidnaps, mystery of state agents in crime. Era of kidnaps, mystery of state agents in crime, which is a bit different from what you're seeing on your screen, that talks of Ruto at pains to explain kidnaps, deaths, and graft. And that just shows you that we've got 2 different headlines of the Standard this morning. What you have on your screen is Ruto at pains to explain kidnaps, deaths, and graft, while what I have speaks of era of kidnaps, mystery of state agents in crime. And this, came following the interview that President William Ruto had yesterday with journalists, where, he really fumbled, for lack of a better word, to explain, the kidnaps, the deaths that have been reported due to police brutality, as well as the graft. Now, was he cornered? That's the question. In an interview, President William Ruto was pressed hard to shed light on state-sanctioned abductions, corruption in government, and his relationship with his deputy. He promised a cabinet shake-up, a dialogue, and a purge. And that follows a public outcry that subsequently led to the government rejecting the Finance Bill 2024. Also, no let-up as Gen Z's plan more protests. For this week, they have particularly singled out Tuesday and Thursday. No let-up as Gen Z's plan more protest. Also, church condemns police brutality, calls for soberness. And, that is the headline on the Standard newspaper. And then finally, to the Star, wrote at NHIF, puzzle of 17 billion shillings payment. Wrote at NHIF, puzzle of 7 billion shillings payment. Management on the spot for attributing some excess payouts to typing errors. And that is a story that is on the Star on page 4 and 5 this morning, that speaks wrote at NHIF, puzzle of 7 billion shillings payments. Now, NHIF managers are on the spotlight following a scathing new audit report that exposes the rot at the National Health Insurer. Taxpayers could have lost billions in irregular payments that have been flagged by the Auditor General Nancy Gathungu in annual report. Management failed to explain expenditure of more than 7.4 billion as per the report of the year ending June 30th, 2023. An analysis of bills owed to healthcare providers revealed 2.9 billion shillings in respect of duplicate healthcare providers with the same name but different outstanding amounts and different hospital codes. So, what's the audit summary from the Auditor General? Unsupported benefit expenses is at 767 million shillings. Unsupported other operating expenses at 2.5 billion. Unexplained overpayment of expenses at 462 million. Duplicate payment for deliveries at 47 million. Irregular claims management at 308 million. Overpayment of legal fees by 38.8 million. Unexplained surgical expenditure at 18.4 million, irregular claims by healthcare providers at 185 million. And this just shows how 7 billion shillings of taxpayer money cannot be accounted for at NHIF. Also, Ruta says, I have no bloods on my hands following police brutality and the death of at least 23 people. That is according to the Kenya National Human Rights Commission. At least 23 people have died across the country. Nairobi leading with about 18 people, but that was as last week. And perhaps the numbers may keep changing depending on just how serious some of the injuries were and whether they lead to fatalities. But that is the headline on the Star this morning. So those are your newspapers. All right, do allow us to take a quick breather. When we come back, we'll be having a conversation around some of the issues that President William Ruto addressed yesterday night in that round table, or yesterday evening in that round table interview on the issue of police brutality, police conduct, where's the blame, as well as, the debt issue. The government is set to borrow 1 trillion shillings in this financial year. And that's a serious one because the current country's debt ceiling is at 11.4 trillion shillings, and that now pushes the debt ceiling even much higher. As well as, does he listen to the people? Is he a listening president? That is the big question, really, that has been touted by many. So that conversation returns in a bit. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Key concerns and key issues that have been on the floor of public discourse for the past 2 weeks, ever since the protest started. Now, there are some areas we'll be able to tackle, including the debt quagmire. There are only 2 options, the head of state says, to tax or to borrow. And it is expected that this coming financial year, once the bill has been able to be amended and some of the considerations put in, the government will borrow 1 trillion shillings. Now, initially, the budget deficit was at about 600 billion. The taxes were supposed to, help in getting 300 billion, but that is not working because the bill was rejected or withdrawn from the National Assembly. So it is expected to hit 1 trillion shillings. That's the debt just for this fiscal year of 2024-2025. We'll also have a conversation around corruption and spending. And the head of state says they're going to cut down budgets for various key parastatals or key offices. Is that possible? And does that help in terms of dealing with the expenditure of the country and police conduct, as well as the big question on, is he a listening president? Does he listen to what the people are saying? So there are so many issues just around this we'll be able to tackle this morning. Your feedback is highly welcomed across our social media platforms on EBN TV. Our SMS feedback line is 23059. Let me introduce my guest in studio. I'm joined by Muito Mureithi, who's a political analyst as well as commentator. Thank you very much, Muito, for coming in this morning.
Yeah, my pleasure. And good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Now, the best place to start perhaps is, you're a former journalist, I'd love to call.
Yeah.
And looking at the timing of this particular roundtable interview and just, the effects it has now had just since last night to now, the conversation has taken a turn on whether people can actually trust what the president is saying. And there's been also questions on the timing of this interview. Some would have preferred it just gone silent and not spoken about it. But the media team, of course, decided to, call for this roundtable, let him address some of these concerns that have been raised. Has the interview achieved what it was meant to do in the first place?
Well, I think I'm most grateful, especially at the initiative by the president to open up so that any form of dialogue can come through, be it organizations that he's planning to also to have visit State House, meet him elsewhere, as he put it yesterday, even on social media platforms. That statement that he made, that he's ready to talk, I think was a very bold statement for a president who has all power and authority vested on him and his office. And I think coming down, stooping to this level that, hey, we will talk, and seeing what he was taken through yesterday by able journalists, I think he's a president who is ready to listen, ready to talk, and at the same time, without being biased, ready to be listened. We should be ready to listen to him also, because he too has a story, as much as we have a story to tell on this other side, as the link as media, and also the generation, the society affected, and that includes everybody else, including our youth in that generation. Right. Yes.
Now, one of the biggest problems we've had as a country is on questions of police brutality and alleged police brutality, because if you look at what the Commission for Human Rights is saying, at least 23 people have died. We've got multiple people injured in various hospitals across the country. And that was one of the first things that he had to address on the police conduct, and whether they were well within the limits of what is stipulated in the law in terms of how the police should handle protesters. And he says, unfortunately, some criminals, quote unquote, have been able to take advantage of this and involve themselves in the protest, causing harm to other people as well as the properties. But the initiative really started as peaceful protests. Where did the line of peace and not peaceful, where was it crossed?
The first day of the protests, which was, I think, the first Tuesday, which was, I think, the previous week, you saw that the police actually were handling issues with a lot of restraint, because they were trying not to find themselves on the wrong side until, I think, 3:30. That's when things started. I mean, that exchange started. Although all this time, it was just chanting, and all this push and pushing forward, pushing back, pushed back. These are the things that we actually witnessed around that time. The cat and mouse chase that was there, the police were running, or were actually taking about the city all over, and there were no gunshots that were heard around that time, or tear gas. But that went on, and until that hour, then I think even the demonstrators would feel maybe we wanted to have gotten to Parliament, maybe to have invaded Parliament by maybe 11 o'clock. Now it's 3 o'clock, that depends on the plans. So what I'm trying to say is that the motive to drive the point home was right. First, let's agree. Things were not so good, and what was contained, much of what was contained in the finance bill, those of us who bothered to just go through it a little, not so much. There are those who actually read the whole of it, but it was actually 683 pages. It's not just 1 page or 2 pages. Yeah. So there was a lot that was to be discussed, but I believe. What happened that day, I think police tried to control themselves as much as also the youth tried to control themselves without causing any form of skirmishes until that hour. So I think there must have been something that triggered maybe there was discontent, a lot that was not contented with what was going on, because maybe they had a timeline. We want to achieve this by this time, and something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Does, President Ruto says, he has no blood on his hands, but there's some isolated cases where, the protesters were peaceful, but unfortunately they were shot and killed. For instance, the first death which was reported was of Rex Kanyike Masai. And, for him to say that he has no blood on his hands, and at the same time not fault the police for that sort of instance where, the protesters were peaceful, it did not require any firearm. To that effect, as a head of state, how much does that statement now do damage to those that are the victims, as well as what does that now say about the police force?
I'm not concluding anything, but seeing from the crowds that I met that morning, that is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I think. The crowds that we met, that was the first week, not the second week. I'll tell you about the second week. But the first week, they were carrying some small bags, of course. They were carrying water and mask, maybe a bottle of water and maybe that piece of cloth. And that is a presumption, is an assumption that that would have been the thing, okay? Because at a certain point in time, there were too many stones along Kenyatta Avenue. But if you walk along Kenyatta Avenue, you don't find such the size of such small stones, anywhere along Kenyatta Avenue. So where did they come from? Is it the police who really brought the stones? No. It must have come with the demonstrators. Right. So would you say that carrying a stone, would not be, tantamount to be considered like a weapon? It was a weapon. And attacking the police, I'm not supporting what the police did, and I'm not supporting any shooting, I'm not supporting any killing, either of the police or of any Kenyan, because we all have a right to live, and we also share similar rights on the Bill of Rights. Yeah. So there is no secluded section where members of the discipline force, police forces, security forces, now their rights are reduced because they are. But you see now when I come now to these government agencies, which are also independent somehow, like the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, we've seen how sometimes they had been misleading in their figures, even in demonstrations earlier. And I can tell you in 2007, they always have an inclination, political inclination. So that is an accusation and can be justified from the records. What you're trying to say is that the Kenya Human Rights does this. Of course, it does not only depend on what it gets from the government, it depends on also what it gets from the International Human Rights Commission, whatever they get from there. So whatever information they give, they must really have a good bargain for it. So information that they disseminate, I think what I would go for sometimes, yes, I know that from the security forces we can have false information, but I think there's a way, there would be a better way, if there would be a better way to, harmonize what we get from the human rights and what we get from the police service. I think that would really settle this matter, because there's a difference of around, I think, 5. Because you had the president talking about 19. That's from the security advice. And the Kenya National, the Human Rights Commission could access, they could 24 bodies because they must be talking from a point of confirmation that this is the real truth. Right. And I believe even those who will be presented before court today, such evidence is what will be tabled before the judges. It's unfortunate, and my special condolences first to the bereaved families, and both divides, either from the security line and also from the civilian. It was something that was not supposed to happen. Yeah. When I looked at the draft copy that was presented, And mine I actually downloaded from Google. I saw all that we were agitating for since day one, after the second reading, had been marked deleting. That is pending the vote that was to be done, that was done last week, which was interrupted. So it was procedural, but these things had been already removed. But if I have other ulterior motives, I will not keep you in the light. I won't put you on the know. And this is what the sponsors, much as we want to say there are no sponsors, the sponsors were there and they know what they wanted. And true to it, even after His Excellency the President withdrew the finance bill, you still saw demonstrators, a certain group of demonstrators going back to the streets. And this time with another slogan. It's not about reject finance bill. The reject finance bill was a Gen Z initiative, okay? But now the Ruto must go was something that was being carried forward from the politics of last year, of Ruto must go, into now let's take advantage of this generation that is cutting across without going by party affiliation. It now has the supporters of the government and the the pro-opposition youth between the age of 18 and 25, thereabout. Let's now capitalize on that one. Now let's take our revolution agenda, so they called it revolution agenda, using the energy of the Gen Z.
Is it not possible for people to just take to the streets and exercise their right as individuals to protest against some of the government's policies? Because you say that there must be sponsors.
Yeah.
Is it possible for people? It's just a people's initiative.
Probability is close to zero.
So who's sponsoring them?
It's impossible to just take to the streets just like that. Going to the streets, it reaches a point where there must have been a certain conviction, and the conviction is a narrative that is created, and that narrative must be pumped very well into the minds of those who grant audience, so that they can be able to agree to it and join in the fray and do the push. That's what happens. But it begins with one person or a group of people. It begins from somewhere. Now, where it starts from, those are the ones who know where they're heading. By Friday, is it Friday? No, last week, the worst day that we had, we saw few activists, but three of them spoke. Led by a gentleman, I don't know who leads, I don't know, Haki, whatever, something.
Africa?
Haki Africa. I think he's the one who said, now we had agreed. This is how sometimes you contradict your position, your statement. We had agreed that we are going to do this until 5 p.m. and now I'm calling off. We have done well this day, so go home before it is dark to avert A, B, C, D. We will advise you on what to do next tomorrow. That is tonight. In the course of the night, we will advise you what we shall do tomorrow.
Where did he speak this?
No, it was in a press conference in a certain TV station. Yeah. So when he said that, the other guy came around and he said, the push continues. And when I'm saying these things is that once you say, we will advise you, of course, I told you about the civil society. I know what they do, Yeah. And you remember, and I gave you an example, when Barack Obama said sometimes you peddle a lot of lies to get the money just to skim money from the donors. And civil society must be patriotic. And I've said this and I'll say it again. Civil society members are Kenyans and they should be patriotic. They should work not towards, it's the fact that they are safe with, and armed with, passports and everything ready for them to go and maybe exile, set somewhere ready that they will go for, asylum, whatever documents ready for them to go to whichever country they have planned, because most of them know where they can run to. Is not right. to light a fire in the country, much as something may not go right or be going right, and you light your country, run away, flee in the name of asylum, and seek exile elsewhere. This has been happening in many countries, only to discover that the ones who sought asylum are the ones who actually kindled the fire to burn their country. Kenya has been a peaceful country, and we always have a way of getting around it. It is my honest desire that our youth may call themselves Gen Z as per the American whatever categorization, the US categorization, because it's them with the boomers that they talk about. You know, it was not a booming moment for Kenyans between 1946 and 1980s. It was not a booming time. It was a booming moment for a booming economy of the Americans. I saw the baby boomers and the boomers, whatever, of the Americans. That was them. So when our Gen Z, generation of our youth inherits this, it becomes a problem. And I'll tell you, the day we started addressing this generation calling itself Gen Z as watoto wa kizazi cha sasa, hawa watoto wa kizazi, si watoto wa Kamau, Okelo, Okenyani, Onyango, Nani, Njeri. No. We disowned them. When we disown them, somebody else takes advantage. And who takes advantage? The social media is there. And it has ready material to pump into them to think in a certain way. Now that vulnerability is what I would like to address, that with what the president is also coming up, the church also should stand, not as people who are ready to compromise. No, it's time now to help our youth, because you saw them even on TV that this was not the way we planned to have this thing going. Okay? Yeah. Something had happened. Yeah. And I'll tell you, on Sunday, I engaged lots of youth. I actually spent my day on in an area called Eastlands, Embakasi, and it's a hotbed of politics, Embakasi. And the youth started being mobilized that night. So you could hear there is a narrative that is being created. And on Monday morning, the group that had not gone to the streets, and these are guys of 30s below 50, they had already purposed that we are joining the Gen Z on Tuesday. Yeah. So word spread. You know, guys were lighting at Manyanja, other guys were lighting at, towards Donholm. They would light there and walk so that they can join in and walk towards Jogoo Road. You know, of course, they were met by the police force that really stopped them at Tomboya Hall. Okay? And they became smart and walked individually, moja, and they closed. But there was a group that came back while we were somewhere in Makadara. Heard that the multitude that was coming from the Embakasi side had been blocked at Tomboya. So they went back running, a group of guys like 30. And they said, ata wakitoa maganzao, pia si tutatoa maganzetu. They were now asking us, how watu wako wapi? You know, because we were a multitude. Tuko watu wengi sana, we spectators. And they asked us, how watu wako wapi? When that big guy flipped his jacket to show us that even hata si tuko nazo. Another guy did the same. So those were two. That's the point. So you cannot claim that they can't be found guns amongst the crowd, you know. And this is what we're trying to say, that if we want to have peaceful demonstrations and have an agenda that is not infiltrated with maybe some form of lies and other ulterior motives brought in by others, then I think what the Gen Zs had done was commendable until 3 p.m. when some other guys maybe had other agenda, thought maybe they would do something else. So I think we're also learning that it is possible, if we are fair enough, to have a restraining, a police force that can act on restraint, as much as a community or a society that would also demonstrate with a lot of restraint.
Right.
So I think it is possible. Yeah.
Right. Now, let me move this conversation forward to the response the government has made to the protest within the 2 weeks. One, they were able to initially first, remove some of these contentious clauses in the bill to which people, which had caused a lot of public uproar, like, the VAT on bread, excise duty on oil. They were able to do that. And then later on, the head of state says he withdrew the bill. Well, constitutionally, he is not able to do that, but he was able to refer that bill back to the National Assembly. And so what we are currently using, because it's the 1st of July, so we are still using the 2023-2024 financial bill.
Yes.
And it feels like only if they had or listened to the people the first time, would have been able to avoid the consequences that came after, where the parliament, buildings was vandalized, also the office of the Chief Justice, if only they had listened to it the first time. And this includes members of parliament as well, because people had been very vocal about reject that bill. They didn't want the amendments, they wanted a whole total reject, but MPs still went ahead and voted yes. So, does the government listen to its people, the electorates, those that put them into those offices that they're currently sitting in?
Cynthia, after the Treasury hands over the finance bill, hands over the finance bill.
Budget estimates, yeah.
Yes, the budget estimates to the finance committee. The finance bill is drafted, okay? And as it is drafted, there are certain areas that they touched that were very sensitive. And that after they had done that, then they presented it to Parliament for the first reading. The second reading is when now they brought it after we had already had these presentations that had been done. And if you have that document and look at it very carefully, by the time they were presenting it, it was reading deleting.
For the second reading?
Yes, it was reading deleting areas which were not to be passed. They were written deleting because according to the procedure of Parliament is that there would come a time when they would actually do the actual vote so that it can be deleted. Now you understand that language?
Yeah.
It was in the process of deleting, but it has already been marked for deleting. Okay, so when time comes for the many who agree or disagree vote, then that is the time that we would have had this thing now, the new document, the document that was to be assented to get prepared, So had we taken time to obtain that copy, then you would have known what is happening. Had we known the procedures of dealing with the finance bill, then we would have maybe understood why the parliamentarians are just sticking to the procedure. Is like you're preparing some food, and since your child on the other side kwa sitting room analia sana, sasa umeamua hautaweka kitunguu kwanza baada ya mafuta, utaweka baada ya chakula kuiva, weke chakula, upike hiyo mashakura. You understand?
Yeah.
Eventually that is what you're going to come up with, because nataka ile kilio ishe, so nataka kupikanisha, because the procedure, the laid down procedure by the Constitution and also the law, that this is how it's supposed to be followed. And the standing orders of Parliament, which are born of the law, this is how it's supposed to be followed. Them, they were just sticking to the normal business. They had never experienced this kind of a thing before, this kind of challenge before. And when it got to a level where now, as the president sitting in State House, and you see that Parliament has been attacked, you get to realize that things are not as normal. So the procedure that would have been taken when you say that the president has no power to withdraw such a thing, this is not the usual time when it is done in calm. That Parliament, okay, sitting down, they have done this, the first reading, second reading. We only had these things before, but we never knew what this is all about. But this time around, we had an idea. Okay? Yeah. But I think as we continue now going forward to 2025 and beyond, it should be an interest of Kenyans, even right now, to start researching to understand what exactly is a finance bill vis-a-vis the budget and anything else that, appertains to Kenyans and Kenyans' livelihood, anything that would affect them in any way. And that includes even understanding the history of the country. And that includes understanding much of what we learn on matters concerning governance and government, they need to be taught. We need to be taught much earlier. So when they broke into parliament, definitely that would add up to the intention of staging a coup.
Would that have been avoidable if members of parliament, they had a parliamentary group meeting just before they voted for the bill on the second reading? Would they, if they had listened and said, we've heard you, we reject as well, or withdraw the bill, would it have avoided the consequences that came after?
Let's agree. Both parties actually had their own meetings.
The Azimio
and the Kenya Kwanza. And any time you must marshal your support towards what you believe and what you stand for. Okay?
But the people don't want the bill.
The people may choose not to want the bill, and majority of us, as a matter of fact, it was out of ignorance. We hadn't even read the first page. We only read the finance bill and we were told, so this cover, anything in this cover is wrong. So reject finance bill 2022-2024. You understand? It's now that somebody now in our sobriety, we will withdraw the document and begin to see, oh, okay, so this is what they were saying about the various things that the president was able to highlight, and much that was being spoken about by the chairman of the finance committee,
right,
who elaborated on these points. But because you see, listening is a personal volition. I can choose to listen or not to listen. It's a choice. But eventually, reality is the one that will speak to me. So Kenyans, we will still have reality speak to us later, much as we dumped it that time. Two, when they broke into parliament, now getting back to the president withdrawing that thing, it had reached a point where something that can hatch a coup has started. And you see, being the president, information must have reached the security top position that Amari A has been broken, Amari B has been broken. These are things we didn't know. The media could not highlight this. Much as they knew this, they could not highlight this because they were on the ground, you know? And accessing an Amari must be an inside job because it's always a secret place, hidden from any other player, any other person. You know? So what I'm trying to say is that breaking into the armory, of course, this explains lots of things because now we had them, we had this, and what you're saying is that, please, if the media also would take the initiative, like we were saying, why can't the media, the way they do a pull-out for whatever commercial bit of thing or something, ask the government to sponsor just a pull-out from the dailies, like the way we used to have the draft constitution. And when we went through it and we understood what we were going through it, those who didn't read and said and allowed maybe Mwai Kibaki to read for them or Raila Odinga to read for them, they voted. But to whose detriment? To their own peril. You know, they're the ones who are complaining today because they didn't know what it was all about. Now, even the bill itself, rejecting it does not mean that the fact that we were the majority who did not, some majority who did not understand it and still supported throw it away, we were right. No, that's just a democratic definition that, okay, majority have their way, minority have their say, but we do not necessarily have to be right. Yeah, that should be very well understood. So I think with time, we will get to understand what were the contents. But how will you get to understand or know what were the contents if you don't desire to know? That is a personal conviction again. I will have to convince myself that I think I need this information so that I don't speak from a point of ignorance, or I don't vote from a point of ignorance, or I don't act from a point of ignorance. I think we need to do that. And that is what saves us from being gullible in whatever manner.
Right. Now, one of the realities as well that we are facing as a country is there are just two ways we can fund a budget. You know, one is through taxes and the other is through borrowing. And that is a line that not just this government, but also previous governments have really struggled to achieve, because normally our revenue, what KRA collects, doesn't really fully meet what the budget is at, and that means there's always a budget deficit that ultimately has to be funded somehow, and mostly through loans. And so President William Ruto says it's not magic. There's no magic in between. It's either, you know, we collect taxes from the people or we borrow. And that means now with the withdrawal of the Finance Bill 2024, which initially had a budget of about 600 billion shillings, Now there's an additional 300 billion to that because the target market for the taxes obviously has now been withdrawn. So we're looking at borrowing 1 trillion shillings within this financial year, Mwito. We have a budget of 3.9 trillion shillings. 1 trillion of that will be funded through loans. I mean, we are stuck in this cycle, and the reality is the country may have to borrow to survive, which puts us into a more debt hole because, you know, our budget, our debt is at 11.4 trillion shillings. Is he right to say, you know, there's nothing else can be done?
Putting myself in his position, leading a country, and that is not supposed to be engaged in other types of investment, you know, as a government, and not as an individual, you're left with options to collect taxes or to borrow. And I would say, just the way he said it, I have no other option. And I would ask you the way he asked them, do you have an option? We don't. Let me tell you, some of these things, and like I try to bring to reality. Let me be in his shoes, or let me be in the shoes of a president, not in Ruto's, in His Excellency Ruto's shoes.
Yeah.
In any president who takes that office, you know, there is no magic that would be done to it. We have thrown away what exactly would have helped us reduce this thing. Okay?
Yeah.
Because of certain reasons. And you heard there were some things also that were not even in the finance bill, but they were so hyped you could believe that they were there, you know. But this is how the politics can actually act against us, you know, because we rejected this thing. So where else do you expect the government to get money from? Okay, we as Kenyans, are we all paying taxes? Are we honest with the tax that we remit to the tax collector? So many people who are in business, they actually register nil. So many. Okay, so to be honest for me to push him to be honest, I must also push us to be honest with ourselves, you know, so that we can be able to cover that one.
We have, an expenditure problem, Mwito. Isn't that another way? If we cut down... I hope
we agree on tax collection, revenue collection that you were talking about. If we be honest, let's allow ourselves be chided where I mean, to take the, you know, the rebuke where it's due. If I am not doing the right thing in terms of remitting my, you know, income tax details as correctly as they ought to, then I'm also part of that problem. Yeah.
Right.
So you're right with that?
As you've rightly put it, according to the president, there are just two ways: to tax or to borrow. Right. Going by that narrative, yeah, we've got a spending problem in the country, and that you'll agree, because if you look at reports from the Auditor General, reports from the Office of the Controller of Budget, there are so many gaps in terms of just the money that we used on allowances as a country, the taxes that are used on planes, whether it's domestic travel, be it for the executive or for every other office, including county governments themselves, the MCAs, the money that are paid for some of these trips they go to, the governors, the money that is spent on, you know, plane tickets, the members of parliament themselves. And if we cut on expenditure, aren't we able to fill some of these gaps that we have in terms of the deficit? Because members of parliament, you know, pocket about 790,000. That is, you know, minus allowances that may come in, and that has been one of the biggest cry from the Kenyans. They want to cut down on these salaries, on these allowances, on this expenditure, and that way we are able to get more money that can go to fill the deficit.
Well, speaking from outside, I can say just reduce their salaries drastically. But if I would put myself in their shoes, you have your constituents to service, your parliament as your responsibility, and you have your own personal business that you were attending to before. So what definitely I'm trying to say is that splitting your time earning whatever you earn from Parliament, it is to cater for, all these responsibilities that you have, both personal, because it's a salary, personal, and also for the service to the community. So what I'm trying to say is that it's easy to say kata hiyo, when I'm speaking about it, concerning somebody else. But when if I would be the one earning this money, then the story would actually change. Okay, even if you ask the MPs in opposition who are condemning finance bill and still talk on expenditure, they won't really get into that area of having the salaries deducted. In fact, they will tell you we need to be cushioned even more. But what I'm trying to say is that yes, there's been some form of extravagance. Some members have shown it that yes, we are enjoying public money this way and the other way, foreign trips and the like. But I think if a correct audit is done on each and every one of them, and in this case, if I would confine my approach on the travels, international, foreign travels. Yeah. When you're traveling to foreign countries, the president is inviting them. Do an audit. I traveled here. This is what I came back with. Go to Ministry A. Do an audit of this certain CS's travel. What had they gone for? What did they achieve after this kind of thing? Of course, there was also some areas where there is a wastage. When you talk about maybe MCAs going to do whatever study they want to do in other countries. Parliament does these kind of trips oftentimes, And what I'm trying to say is that these are kind of things that should be checked and cut down. We talk about parastatals that were supposed to be dealt with, like 200 of them, which were marked that they were to be, shut down or something, or maybe merged. And this is what we would expect the government to do. We were expecting the government actually to do by the time they were coming in with this finance bill. So if it's not touching such areas, then it would have been a failure, and it would be a failure. So cutting down on costs, that means we should also, on our side, reduce our demands.
Right. On corruption, if you look at the headline on the Star newspaper this morning that speaks of about 7 billion shillings that is unaccounted for within the NHIF sector, and this is just among the many audit reports that have come out of money that is unaccounted for to the tunes of millions and billions of shillings. What is the proper way of dealing with corruption? What is the proper way that a head of states can deal with corruption? Because we seem to have that problem, we just don't know how to deal with it.
You see, like when I look at the 7 billion, much as we say that there is this money that has been, swindled, Kenyans have been swindled by these corrupt fellas, 7 billion shillings. This might be maybe over a period of time. It's not necessarily that this thing happened within the past 1.5 years. Okay, of the KK leadership.
It's to the end of June 30th of 2023's financial year.
2023 financial year. Yeah. That was the report that they came up with. Now, that was for 2022 and before. So what you're trying to say is, when you inherit a government and you find this kind of, rot in certain parastatals, the best thing is to try and see how best can you deal with it. Let's appreciate and see what the Social Health Authority is going to do, because it never existed. There was no one who was checking the NHIF, beyond that, under the ministry. Now the ministry has that authority that will now be able to, is actually a regulatory authority, that will be able now to check the chief. And maybe some accountability will be pumped into the chief accounts. So I'm hoping that this is a change in the right direction. So I think it might work. It might work, taking that as an example. So we give credit where it's due. If the government had taken this step, which he has actually campaigned for, right from, I think, the days of his campaigns, I think I can see that what he promises, some of these things might become a reality. Had we allowed the finance bill and say maybe 2025 we shall be keen, maybe we would have a different experience. But I would urge Kenyans to start reading this finance bill. The 2024-2025 bill that has been withdrawn, it's available. Just go download it and please go through it and see what exactly advised your judgment.
Right.
Yeah.
So as we wrap this conversation up, final word, Muito, what next? What do we do now next as a country? Because the protests are still on. The demonstrators say they will be taking to the streets this week as well. Members of parliament have been put on the spotlight over some of them, their arrogance, others, just complete disregard of the public views. You've got a head of state who is receiving fire left, right, and center, and demands keep on coming in for him to do this, and do that. What do we do now next as a country? What are some of the conversations we need to be having from this point onwards as we wrap it up?
First of all, spiritual or not, we must pray for this country. And we must pray for this country, knowing that the God who knows what is at the back of my mind is the one I'm talking to. Because hypocrisy is worse than witchcraft. We will claim that we are praying for this country, yet we have other ulterior motives. Today you hear some churches criticizing the members of the political class. Yet no member of the political class walks into the church with money without an invitation. And an invitation, you make an invitation knowing exactly what this person is actually targeting. He wants to meet a crowd and speak to it, sell his agenda. Now, this is what happens. So when you hear them again now making that about turn, is because they think 2027 is very far, 2026, when they will begin to say, no, for me, I want to be fair with the politicians because they have some fundraiser somewhere they want to do. And this is what they do. So what I'm trying to say as a parting shot is that I would encourage the youth, keep up with the push, not with the demonstration. Keep up with the push. And how do we keep up with the push? We have discovered that even our youth, majority of them were less informed on the contents of the 683-page finance bill document. Then they saw the cover, like the headline of the newspaper, Finance Bill 2024, reject, and they rejected. But the contents that were working on what you heard the president talk about, the ICT hubs and all these things, how the shift is going to benefit us, how, many other changes that were supposed to come about, although we were to be taxed. Some of these things, I think we need to look at them with a very sober mind. We, again, shun the inciters and think about Kenya as a country that you would like to see tomorrow. Otherwise, if we take the course of countries like Egypt, they thought they were doing a revolution. But the same youthful generation that used to be at, is it Trafalgar Square, somewhere, that square, I think it's Trafalgar Square, something. The same youth who took to the square in Egypt, in Tunisia, countries like Algeria, countries like, Syria, which other countries suffered? I think Yemen. When you think you're causing a revolution and burning down your own country, when you think you are getting rid of a leadership like what the Rwandese did, it was terrible. And it starts like a joke, Let's get this president out. Let's get this government out, and you ban your country. And that is what happened with countries like Rwanda. We may speak good things about them today, but let it be well understood that it started the way Kenyans are now using the same recipe to burn down their nation. I would ask the youth to humble themselves, at the same time not get to a point where they would feel that they are the ultimate of wisdom and knowledge, Of course, they could be ahead in terms of technology, but the technology itself was pioneered by the older generation. You know, the beginning or the invention of computer and all these other technology, the microchip and everything, was done by their great grandfathers who are there in the 40s and 50s. That is when it started. So, one much as you'd like to brag that you're living in a house that you can be able to put wallpaper, and before then they were painting paint that was not holding, of course appreciate that there is a wall that you're living in. So it's for the Gen Zs to also calm down, position themselves where they can be guided, advised. Otherwise, if they don't do that, they will find themselves misused, because those are misusing them know their energy, they know their capability, and they will use that capability to destroy their very own country. Then eventually, we all cry together.
Right.
I think it's time that we get to agree, humble ourselves, listen to one another. Let's not be so biased that it's them to say and us to listen. It's for us to say as much as they tell us. Let's talk and agree. Once we create that convergence, then we're able to surge on as a country.
All right. Thank you very much, Muito Mureithi, for coming in this morning, a political commentator and analyst, just to take stock of what some of the issues that President William Ruto spoke about yesterday evening. Of course, the reactions will continue to come in from various leaders and even the common mwananchi as well. So in case you've missed this broadcast, you can rewatch it across our social media platforms. That is on EBN TV. Keep the conversation going, as well as on X